Hello everybody, welcome back to my workshop, welcome back to my garage. What we're going to be doing today is going over finishing these guitars as far as putting the finish on them. As you can see, this one with the quilt top, it's got some bevels on it. Went with a blue burst on this one, and this one more of a blistered maple. This one just a normal round over, and I went with kind of a almost like a tobacco burst really on this one, but it's got a little bit more red in it. And the backs of both are going to be left natural. And what we're going to be doing in this video is just basically going through the finishing process on how I did both of these guitar tops. I used Angelus leather dies on these, and I think they came out really well. So let's get rolling. It is time to start dyeing the tops on these guitars. Guitar 1, this one, what I'm going to do is this one's going to get a more of a Kindred burst, so a brown to black and then a kind of a yellow in the center. That should really look good on this blister maple. I'm using Angelus leather dies. Basically I watch a lot of BigDGuitars, his channel, and he does a lot of staining or dyeing with these leather dies. They work really well for him. I've used it on my Great Guitar Build-Off build, and I had pretty good success on that, so I'm going to try it again on this. I've got the fretboard marked off or masked off. I've also got the back masked off, because what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to take this burst to the edge of the maple, and then the back is just going to be the back is just going to be clear or natural finish on that. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go with a dark brown on the body, 2 good coats of that. And then I'll probably feather in a little bit of black to get that darker look along the edge. And then so just putting this in, basically just keep the rag saturate, or keep the rag moving, putting the stain on, let that go in. We're going to do 2 coats of this brown, this dark brown, to let it really get into the wood. And you can see it start to pop some of that figuring that was in this maple. This was a blister maple. I think it's going to look really good with this burst on it. These bodies were sanded down to 220 or to 400. So should be able to, if I get any sanding lines on this, if I see any areas that need sanding, of course I can do it after the stain is done and hit it with that. But I'm just keeping the rag moving, pushing this in and moving this color around, not letting it sit. Working it into the wood. From watching Big D's stuff, I mean his rag never stops moving when he's doing his when he's staining a top. Okay, it's looking pretty good for the brown. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to feather some black into the edges. I'll hit the whole thing again with brown to wash that black back. So what I'm doing is I want to get the edges and fade this in. Because I want that darker outside. So I'm doing about 2 inches, and I'm just feathering it from the outside towards the edge. And of course I want to get this round over on the edge, but that's really darkening up that edge, which is what I want. Now I'm going to come back and wash the whole thing in brown again to kind of blend that black in. And you can see that this is pushing that black out and bringing that brown back in. Alright. Take a clean rag and just kind of wipe this back. And what I'm going to do, I think, because it's pretty dark right now, for sanding back, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of yellow on this now, and kind of pull up a little bit of that brown in the center, to where when I go to do the sand back, it's going to look a little bit better. Because right now it's pretty dark. That black really darkened it up a little bit, so what I want to do is just take a little bit of the yellow right now and pull some of that color back out. Let's get some yellow on there and move this stuff around a little bit. See if we can pull a little bit brown out of the middle. Yeah, yellow's pulling up quite a bit of the black and brown. There we go. That's bringing that up a little bit. All right, so that's actually pretty dark. That's all going to be sanded back and to leave some of that grain in the wood. So we're going to let this dry, and then we're going to sand it all back after about 24 hours of drying time. So what I've got here is just 320 grit sandpaper on my orbital sander. I'm using light pressure, and I've got the speed turned down as low as it'll go on the sander. Just giving some moderate pressure on here. I'm sanding for about 5 minutes to get everything pulled back to what you see here. So it's time to start dyeing this body. I've already put the dark coat of brown on, and then I've sanded that back, and you can see it's got a nice figure to it, and there's the figuring soaked in really well. That brown soaked in. So what I'm going to do now is this is a combination of kind of a Brock burst and a Kindred burst. I watched some of the videos that Big D did on BigDGuitars, and those finishes seem to come out really nice, especially on figured tops like this. So I'm just going to follow his recipe. Basically, I did the brown, dark brown with some black on it as well, sanded all that back after it dried for 24 hours, and now I'm going through with the colors. It says to go around the edges. I'm going to go around the edges with red. I don't want to put a ton of red in there because he said red's really hard to get out, and I've never worked with red before. So putting it in my rag, and I'm just going to go around the edges and feather it out. So I want it right down in there, because what I'm going to do, I'm just putting this red in there about 2 inches around the edge, and I'm just stroking it out to the sides, and then I'm going to come back in and blend that in with some orange, and that's going to blend this red in. And I'm shooting for a teardrop shape in the middle, so it's going to be kind of like this red, brown, orange, yellow. Okay, so get down here in the cracks, or right where the edge, the neck meets. All right, so that's my red in. Now what I'm going to go in is I'm going to go in with some orange and blend this in. And it's going to blend that red in. And you can see that red pulled up some of that brown and the black as well. So basically I'm pulling this red in now to the center, and you can see that's getting rid of those hard lines where I stroked it on. And you can see it's darkening up where it's pulling that black and that brown back out. But I can see I don't have any sanding lines or anything like that, so that's good. So we had a good final sand on it. And then what I'm doing is I'm just going to leave the top bursted, and then the sides are going to go back to the sides and the back are going to go back to natural. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with yellow. I kind of want that teardrop here in the center. And I'm going to come back in with some dark brown. Go around the edges to feather all that in. Darken up those edges just a little bit more to get more of that Kindred burst out of it. I'm going to feather that brown in there. And I want that just a touch darker. So I've got my black rag from yesterday. I'm just going to put some neutral dye on it to kind of reactivate that rag a little bit. Work that in. I'm going to push a little bit of black in there. I'm just going to wipe all this off with a clean rag. Then I'm going to go in with a little bit of orange. Blend those edges a little bit to pull that brown and the black blended a little bit better. And we should be about done. All right, that orange is blended in that brown nicely. It's almost coming out like a tiger eye finish, sort of, especially with that blistered maple. And now I'm just going to go in with some yellow. Just pull a little bit more of that color out down here. And then once this dries, I'll hit it with some steel wool, and that's going to help bring some of that color off too. I think it's got a nice pattern with that yellow there in the center. All right, there we go. That's looking pretty good. I think we're going to be happy with that. And now I'm just going to take a clean rag, wipe off any excess, and this is going to get hung up to dry. But as you can see, I think that looks really good. Here I'm just going over the body with steel wool. I'm using 4/0 steel wool. Again, this is for about 5 minutes, and I'm vacuuming as I go. All right, now it's just time to get the neck mast off, and I can start shooting the sanding sealer. So this guitar is going to get a blue ocean style burst on it. So what I'm going to do is this one's going to get 2 coats of black, or basically a good coat of black, solid coat of black underneath. That's going to dry, and then we'll let that dry for 24 hours. We'll do a sand back on it, and then start working on the blue and the turquoise. So I'm just going to get my black rag here. So what I'm doing here is just a good solid coat of black, and then I'm going to let this dry for 24 hours and then sand it back. Again, I'm using 320 grit sandpaper on my orbital sander with it turned down to the lowest speed, and I'm using moderate pressure. This is about 5 minutes worth of sanding. For the color here, what I'm doing is I'm first going to do a coat of turquoise over the entire top. And you can see it's really popping that black where the figuring is on the wood. That black figuring is really coming out from the black dye previous. Now I'm going in with dark blue around the edges. About 2 inches all the way around. I don't want to go super heavy with it. And then I'm going to take turquoise again to wash that blue in and blend the edges. Here I'm just going over it with wiping it down with a clean cloth to get any excess off. Making sure I've got in good right at the neck and heel joint. And now I'm just coming in with some neutral dye just to kind of wash everything together, to kind of get it to the color and the fade that I like. So the dye's had a good amount of time to dry. It's actually been dry for about 48 to 72 hours, somewhere in there, 2 to 3 days on one and 3 to 4 days on the other. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go over it with some steel wool, and that's going to pull the dye, any dye that's still on the top of the guitar off, and it's kind of make the colors pop a little bit. After I finish that, then we'll go on with applying the sanding sealer. So first I'm going to do is just get these bodies prepped for that. I'm going to be just using some 4/0 steel wool, give it a good rub. Vacuum it up as I go, and see how it turns out. And again here I'm just using 4/0 steel wool, vacuuming as I go. About 5 minutes I'm spending on the top to pull that dye up. My apologies for not having it in the video on putting the sanding sealer on. I shot that footage, but it just came out really super bad. It just wasn't worth putting in. But basically what I did is just a couple very light coats of sanding sealer to begin with, just to kind of lock that dye in to where when I put the finish on, it doesn't bleed back up. And then after I got those 2 dust coats on, I went through with 3 heavier coats. All in all, it's got 5 coats of sanding sealer on it. So this should keep the dye locked in for when I apply the finish to the top. It'll keep that dye from bleeding through. I just want to say thank you for tuning into this video. I hope you like what I'm doing. If you do, please click like and subscribe. Also, please leave a comment below if you see something that I could maybe do a little bit differently, or if there's something you'd like to see. But until next time, take care.